Welcome everyone, we're Kensington Team 8 and we're here to talk to you today about conflict resolution and how can we best communicate that. So we decided that we're going to start off with a little bit of a scenario, some type of exercise. So don't look at your cards yet, I'm going to give you a chance to kind of go over it. So here we're at Hope Business School has had a motion to start classes earlier. This is going to take place immediately, it's going to be in effect starting on Monday. That would mean that starting class from 7 to 10, the next class would be 11 to 2, so that means you will be starting earlier. You have been the select group to be our focus group that will make the decision. A decision must be made by the end of the next 5 minutes. So I'm going to give you a minute. Each of you has a different role. You cannot tell each other what the role is, but you're going to put your sticker on, so 1 through 6, and then you have to interact with each other and you have to come up with a decision by the end of the next 5 minutes. Really playing your role will be essential to making this a very, very fun experience. So go ahead, and you have a minute now to read your cards and get into character.
I have a question.
Yes, Ron.
Like making it an hour earlier.
2 hours earlier.
2 hours earlier, sorry. Can I like assume that I can change the 7 till 10 to let's say 7 till 10 p.m.? No, seriously, I mean, or is it just this and that's it?
Nope, this is the only way that it can go. It either goes stays the
So
same,
either it's this way or no way?
or it stays the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So now you're going to assume your role and your character. You're either for or against the change, and you have to really.
Are these inspired by real life?
I don't think so. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't let everybody see who you are.
So sorry, it's either keeping this or changing it,
Correct. It's either keeping it the same 9 o'clock classes
or change that.
or 7 o'clock changes. All right, we're going to get started. You have 4 more minutes to discuss. Go ahead.
So, anyone have any opinions?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think it will solve us great. It will save us a lot of time, which is very precious. We can be more free to look for jobs and career ways. And to start the class at 7 and to finish it at 10 would be a great start for the day.
Interesting.
I don't agree.
I don't agree either, that's ridiculous.
No,
7 in the
yeah.
morning, it's not even light then.
It's also like halfway through the year. So.
Yeah, well, this
This
is
is not gonna happen.
Yeah, but this is life, and like you know, sometimes you have to adjust to things.
And also sometimes in life you keep things the same, and it's awesome.
Guys, you have to think how many hours you have.
Forget it.
If you start really
Forget
early,
it.
then you have the
Forget
whole
it.
day to do whatever you want. Come on, guys,
Exactly.
from 7 to 10, and then you're free. You have the whole day.
But I'm not free to sleep in past
And
like
also you have
6.
to think. For example,
Alright,
in my
I'm going.
case, they will help me so much to manage my life, to manage my personal things. This would be really, really important for me.
I
But what about people
Why you
with
say
I do
no?
it for you.
Why you say no?
I do it for you.
Guys, let each other
But
finish.
why you say no? You just
No,
want
I
to
do it
sleep
for
more?
you. No, I do it for you.
Oh, really? You just want to... Okay, Phil, you want just to sleep more?
No, it's not only that. I find that my students are not as awake and responsive in class. We start at 9 o'clock, let alone 7 o'clock. Everyone's going to skip because they're not going to be able to get in on time, or they're going to sleep in.
No,
and they're not
when
gonna
you wake up at
contribute.
7, you actually go to sleep really early.
You don't wake up at 7. You have to be in class at 7.
Yeah, but you will go to sleep really early.
Says who?
No.
So,
during
what-
the week.
what are we
we
gonna
all
decide,
adults,
guys?
We don't have party
Let's
during the
vote.
week.
No.
Who's for keeping the same times? Who's for
No.
changing?
I'm convinced.
yeah.
I'm
You're
convinced.
convinced?
Yeah.
Who's for changing the times?
Yes.
Hey, what's your vote?
I don't know.
Guess what? Guys, we have a conflict! Wow!
Very good. So you see how even sometimes the easiest situations can come into conflict. You guys started talking over each other. Adeline had to really help you to kind of stay on task. You know, the vote still was split down the middle. Nobody actually had a majority or a minority vote. So you can really see how conflict can arise in any type of business environment, even in your personal lives. So now we're going to proceed and talk a little bit about how conflict can be helped and how we can hopefully use our better communication to do that. Sonia?
Okay. First of all, we will have a look at what is conflict. Conflict has many definitions, but generally in workplace, we define it as a disagreement between two or more peoples or parties, they perceive a threat on their concerns or feelings, so on. And the threats they conceive could be physical, emotional, or the status. And usually the people engaged in conflict, they tend to respond based on the perception of the situation rather than keeping a subjective view. This perception can influence by the gender, the age, the experiences of the people engaged. So why conflict management is so important? So, because nowadays conflict is like part of our daily life and in our workplace, especially nowadays a lot of companies are globalized, so it is very diverse, and the workplace environment is very complex. You might involve people from different country, different culture. So because there are so many differences in your workplace, it's intend to have more conflict. So the more differences in the workplace, there will be there tend to be more misunderstanding, and usually the conflicts arises from misunderstandings. And there's recent studies say reports that manager devote around 42% of their time dealing with conflicts, which means millions of dollars of payroll, because you spend such a big amount of time on that. And also, apart from managers spending time on that, it also will affect the prosperity of the company in terms of affecting employees' morale and affecting the turnover, and in worst case will arise some litigations. So understanding the conflict management is really important to reduce the negative effect of the conflict and to turn the negative effects of conflict into a positive learning experience to the workers, and it will help to increase the efficiency, productivity, and also the harmony of the team. So it will benefit the organization and the management in the long run. So I'll hand over to Barbara to introduce the source of conflict.
Alright, so to better understand and manage conflict properly, we need to understand what the sources of conflict are. There's four major sources of conflict. One is interpersonal, that arises from difference of opinions, difference of perception between employees in a workplace. There's organizational, external factors, and change-related conflict. To break it down to the work environment, I've simplified it into four main points. The first one being limited resources. Conflict can happen very easily if resources are unfairly allocated between departments in an organization, or for example, between individuals, or there's no clarity in terms of the resources of the company. As I mentioned before, it could arise from different values, goals, and perceptions that people have, priorities, work ethic, etc., that people might possess. And what comes across as fair to Ron, for example, might not come across the same way to Phil, and depending on cultural backgrounds. And I think we all see that working within our teams in this MBA program as well. What is socially acceptable in certain scenarios could be quite insulting in another scenario. If the team has poorly defined responsibilities in terms of no one knows what they're doing, they just have a goal, but there's no actual functions allotted to individuals in order to achieve that goal. Conflict is a very common thing that arises. Lastly, it's about change. So for example, where you've got mergers and acquisitions or structural changes happening within two different companies, if there's a clash of work ethic, company cultures, team morales, etc., or even the way that things are handled, it can lead to conflict. Moving on, if these sources are not managed properly, or should we say, the flower is not nipped at the bud, we could have some serious consequences. Well, they could be good or bad. For example, in terms of good, if it's managed correctly, it could become a source of innovation, creativity, and development. You could easily nip it in the bud and increase team morale, rebuild team trust, improve the working culture, and overall have a positive effect on the company. Whereas if it was managed badly, you might see resignations, low productivity, people being absent from work, over sickness, people having to work overtime on account of others who perhaps don't care as much about the same job. So again, it comes back to personal perceptions. To talk further about this and the way we can communicate, I'll pass over to Selby.
Thank you. So communication and conflict go hand in hand. As you may know, communication is vital in terms of building successful, healthy relationships. As future managers, it's important that we understand effective communication tools such that we can know how to handle problems and conflict that may arise. As we are looking at the different communication styles, there are 3 that we've identified: passive, aggressive, and assertive. The passive communication style is prominent in people who have low self-esteem. These are individuals who, at all costs, hide their feelings, hide their opinions for the sake of others. Passive communicators usually do not give eye contact. They talk on a low tone, as well as they hold in their feelings so much that they get to a point, when they get to the point of the threshold, they give large outbursts, but then after that they resort back to their passive attributes. Aggressive, which is one of the I would say not the social norm, is also prominent in individuals who have low self-esteem. And these are people who have had previous or past issues with social, emotional, or physical abuse. They tend to exude their opinions, their ideas without considering anyone else's. So they disregard anyone else's feelings or opinions and ideas. These individuals are very aggressive, their body language is very strong, they talk in a loud tone, and they're usually physically abusive as well. The optimal state is the assertive. That is with individuals who predominantly have high self-esteem. This is the optimal state of communication, and this is the place in which successful managers should operate from. They tend to have strong opinions, ideas, but are also cognizant of the ideas and feelings of others. So they take into consideration the feelings of others when making decisions. These individuals have great eye contact. They're able to look at you in the face. They communicate well, gestures, the distance from which they stand to you, from you when communicating. And they're usually, like on the slide it says, let's talk, let's have a think, trying to engage your feelings and understanding as it relates to communicating back and forth. Having empathy is important as it relates to the way in which you communicate with one another. Empathy is really just a matter of putting yourself in the shoes of someone else, being able to understand what somebody else is feeling, someone else's thoughts towards the situation as you are communicating and making a decision. So having empathy is very important, specifically as we put ourselves in the future as managers. How are we going to be putting ourselves on the other side, and really when we're making decisions, when we're saying things to people, what is the other person thinking and how are we making a decision based off of that? When we look at empathy, there are empathy blockers. You can be very insensitive to the way people feel. So we have noted some 3 key empathy blockers, which are domination, which is threatening words and threatening tones and name calling, as well as denial, refusing to confront the situation. So, if there's a conflict, you can have the idea that, hey, the conflict doesn't exist, so you're refusing to actually deal with the situation at hand. And manipulation, so it's a matter of withholding pertinent information, not really addressing the issue, manipulating it in the sense that it comes back to you and allows you to have the upper hand. So when we're looking at empathy, be careful to look at the empathy blockers when dealing with and communicating. And all of these are important as we look at how we are dealing with conflict. Okay?
Thank you. Okay, so I mean, in order to convey the proper message, and we've seen this time and time again, all communication is mostly non-verbal communication. So it says here 55%. You know, you probably heard other numbers, but the main way of communicating is non-verbal. Now, what that means is that more than what we say and how we say it is how we actually interact with people. Elias, if you could please stand up for 1 second. Thank you. So I'm going to introduce myself to you. Hi, my name is Arturo. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. How did that feel? How do you feel with a handshake? How do you feel? How did it make you feel, that handshake that I gave you?
Aggressive,
Okay, why?
because it was strong.
Yes. What else?
Uh,
You didn't feel me pulling you a little bit?
yes, exactly.
Okay, this is an example that I had. Thank you. You can sit down again.
Thank you.
This is an example. I had a boss once, and he was very assertive while communicating, but he always tried to assert his authority by handshake, and it was a running joke in the office. He would always go, you know, with his hand on top. He'll pull you in, and he'll pull really strong. And also during meetings, when he would have contact with other people, he would do it in a very kind of invasive way. So instead of, you know, if you're in a meeting and I'm going to give Seldom some compliments on his work, I'll maybe put my hand in his back to reassure him that my opinion is sincere, he would actually put his hand like this and make pressure on your shoulder. So that would be very, very dominant. And, you know, it goes into non-verbal communication, not only when we touch other people, but when we invade their space, when we have eye contact with them, whether we're being sincere or not, how we use our hand gestures. And they vary, our clothing, our posture, they vary through all cultures. For example, Asian cultures tend to not look people in the eye because they feel it's a little bit a lack of respect. Whereas in the Western culture, if people don't look you in the eye, they might seem like they're trying to hide something. So this is all very important to bear in mind while you're trying to be assertive in your communications, because you might be saying the right things in the right way, but you're not conveying the right message with your body and with your actions. Now I'll hand you over to Melissa.
Alright, so now we're going to talk a little bit about how using these different communication styles, we can work to avoid conflict and to work to resolve conflict a little bit better. So as they've discussed, assertive conflict, in order to communicate assertively, you really want to get into the situation. You really want to have that empathy with the person or the group that you're working with to try to get rid of the conflict. So you do want to make sure that you're getting all of the clues. It's going to be your needs and my needs, and it's going to come together to our needs to address the situation. And you got to clearly address. I notice that you often are answering calls during the meeting. You're getting right to the point. You're not walking around. You're not being passive. You're not being overly aggressive. And you really then want to express your feelings. I find it hard to concentrate. The group is, you know, the productivity has gone down. You really want to make sure that you're making it a personal connection so that you can then try to diffuse the situation. You also want to make sure that you have a desired outcome. Let's break for 5 minutes, and then this will help us to be more productive in our meeting. So it's very clear who, what, where, when, why, and how to get to an ending, and be very assertive in your communication. This is not just it's not just how they are, but as how we are. So you really want to make sure that you're bringing it again back to the group and why this will help in the long run. Next. So also you have to remember that communication is a two-way street. So the messages that you're also bringing out there, they could be received and perceived differently. So you always want to be able that you're checking in. You know, make sure that you're summarizing the points. Make sure that everybody's staying on the same page. So it's not just all about how you're talking, but it's also how that message is then in turn being received. So again, when you're going into conflict resolution, you want to make sure you're establishing a neutral zone to talk about this. You know, you're the boss and you have a problem with your subordinates, calling them into your office to really get that conversation going automatically puts them in the defensive because you're on your space. So it's a matter of finding a place and a time that's kind of comfortable for both of you to talk out the situation. You also want to, again, be empathetic. You want to make sure that the way that your body is, the tone of your voice is calm and soothing, especially depending on how the conflict is and what the type of situation is that you're dealing with. Some of them could be more sensitive, some of them might be a bit personal, so you always want to make sure that you're leveling the playing field and making sure that you're approaching it appropriately for that situation. So you might have to work, there might have to be different ways that you tackle conflict. There might be different, you know, better options that work for better people, better things that work for better situations. You always want to make sure that you're really focusing on coming up with an action plan for that particular situation. And then I think that brings us on to Maria.
Okay, who deals with conflict in an organization? Well, it's usually human resources who is in charge to put special training programs to train employees, but it's very, very important that the top management is actively involved in conflict resolution too. It's not only because they give an example, but I think you can all think of someone in your previous company who is really good at dealing with conflict, and you are going to have to deal with these things in your jobs too. And when you grow in an organization, the higher your position, you have more layers of people to manage. So it's very important that you can place systems to train other people to deal with conflict. And as we saw that how important conflict it is and how much time managers spend dealing with it, you need to put the correct systems, and just by improving in a little bit of conflict management, the company will gain in productivity and other benefits that will far outweigh the cost of any training program. So we already talked about why is it so important, how to handle it, and we're going to give you one example of how you can put it in practice in your offices. So have anyone know about the 6 thinking hats? Has anyone heard about them? No? Okay, well basically it's a really simple method created by someone called Edward de Bono. He created the concept of lateral thinking. So this basically means that normally we deal with conflict by arguing. So as you did at the beginning, you have your opinion, you have your point of view, the facts, the information you have, and you try to convince the other. So it's how you deal with conflict and discuss about it, and at the end maybe you can vote or you can, but sometimes it's not that easy to come to a single decision. So he basically says that there are 6 different ways that our brain functions in 6 different ways of thinking. So the first one is the blue one, which sees the big picture, is the one that decides what other kind of thinking we're going to use. He uses as a metaphor 6 different hats, so it's easy to use. The white one is about the facts. It's about being objective and just give me the numbers, the information that you have, and that's it. Don't give me any opinions. The red one is about feelings. So this is the time where people can be angry, can be happy, they can say what do they feel about the issue or the situation. But once you take the hat off, you cannot talk about that anymore. So then the black one is the negative. So that's when everyone has to say something about why this idea is not going to work. This is also a very important hat because you can, every project or every has also risks or that you need to take into account. But it's also important that people who believe in the project also have to say negative things about their project. And then the yellow is the positive one, so it's the opposite. You have to say why this project is going to work, whether you like it or not, but what are the benefits of this project. And then the green one comes with the creativity. So what are the alternatives, what other things we can do, think outside the box. And basically the leader of the group has to put on the blue hat, decide which hat everyone else has to use. They all have to use the same one at the same time. And this has been used in many companies, and it has reduced meeting time by 50%, and it helps to deal with conflict much better. So we're gonna try a little exercise again. We're gonna do, so you all have your roles. We're going to play the same roles. But there's going to be one leader. I don't know if they want to be the leader. We're going to wear the blue hat. You're going to decide. You have also 5 minutes, but you are going to decide. Okay, guys, let's all put the red hat and talk about opinion. Now let's move to the positives and.
Okay, same scenario.
Same scenario, same rules, everything.
Okay, team. Let's start. So, new class hours. What's the overall feeling of it? What's the big picture aspect of it? Talk it out.
So we're the
We have to
red
remember
hat.
to pick your color hat. So
We're
you're all
blue hat
gonna
right
give
now.
us
Yeah.
one.
We all
So
have
one of
different
you
hats.
Wait, do I get
You're
one
all
for
red.
each hat? One to
You
each
have-
person?
No.
Everyone has
Yeah.
to wear the same hat.
Yeah.
So you have to, you know that here people are for and against this policy. So you have to, for example, you wear the blue hat, so you have to tell everyone else. Now we're going to use the
A
the
different, a non-blue
black
hat.
hat. So
Oh,
everyone
okay.
has to say the negative things, even the ones that are.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go yellow hat first.
Yeah.
Let's go positive. What are the benefits?
As I said, you have a lot of time. You have more time because you start early, so you have time to do your things. You can go to the gym. You can go to pick up your children from school. So
Start early, finish early.
More time in the day. All right.
Yeah.
Be positive. Anybody else? Positives?
I'm not allowed to speak English.
No, I give you permission to speak now. Permission granted.
Yeah,
But
more hours in the day.
I have no positive.
You have no positives.
Also, there'll be
Yeah.
different leaving times, and so if you leave earlier, there might not be, as congested.
As suggested. Room times. All right. Nice. Let's go. Let's go intuitive. How do people feel about this? Really get down deep. And
Confused.
she feels very confused,
Conflicted.
conflicted. Yes, that happens.
I feel it's unfair.
Unfair.
Yeah, why should I
Interesting.
work more?
It's not. Is it working more though?
I'm gonna have to wake up early to come to work. It's not.
So that's.
You know, I'm staff member and
Yeah, you don't want to come up early to work, even if you get to go to the pub earlier.
who goes to the pub at 3?
You can start a trend. I don't know. Everyone going to the pub at 3. It's a new 5.
Everyone
Start
has
a new happy
different priorities, and so a lot of people have already scheduled their lives
Yeah.
around the existing hours. So to change midway through the year, is throwing off people's.
That's a good lead into the negatives. Let's talk about some negatives.
Okay.
Yeah. No, that would definitely be one. I mean, halfway through school, it's tough to switch everyone. Say, all right, tomorrow all classes have changed, and there's a feasibility aspect of it too. That
All students are gonna complain. We're gonna have so much
Yeah.
hassle, complaints.
we can talk about how students
Yeah.
love complaining at the school.
Yeah.
So we don't say about that. No, it's a huge negative.
Yeah.
And then some people have families, and so
Yeah.
trying to
And
figure
some people
out
actually live
childcare.
really, really far from here. So
True. So if you have to be here for
Yeah.
7,
But
leave
plus
at
we're
6. That means you're up at
cooks.
5 every day. 5 every day is a bit early, especially if people go to bed at 3 in the morning.
Early
Take 2
bird
hours of sleep.
catches the worm.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
What happens when the worms are still sleeping?
Yeah.
It's too early.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Is that all the hats we need? Are we still going?
I think that's so. How do you feel about the first time you discussed about this and the second one using this methodology? Did you?
I think the
feel any-
second time was much more
Organized?
Efficient.
yeah,
and
organized,
effective.
efficient. We all actually cooperated. We all listened to each other instead of just arguing. I think it's actually a really good method.
And we got more information, like the positive aspects, the negative aspect, and
I thought it was funny that with the red hat, everybody went negative. Nobody said anything positive with the red hat
Yeah.
on, so
So,
yes, our intuition is very negative.
no, and also, yeah, I like it because it makes you think, even if you were very much for it, saying, okay, that's cool, you can still be very for it, but just to play devil's advocate, go against it. What are some negatives? And you might see things that you didn't originally see.
Yeah.
Which is
and
Yes, actually, if it's so, it's difficult dealing with conflict when there are people who think about one way and others think differently. But with this method, it really helps people, and that's why it's lateral thinking, because you as manager you can lead people where you want. So if you feel that the group is very negative, you can change them, and at the end you can reach to more creativity, and you can reach to solutions much faster. So.
cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a
For
question.
questions too.
Do you have do you know what, I'm sure there's some, but they're pretty rare for sure, but what do you do when a conflict cannot be resolved?
So it's a lot of times when you're dealing with conflict, you start with just each other. In a workplace, you can go to bring in human resources. It's not necessarily that the conflict will never be resolved. It might be a matter of, neither gets their way, and you find a nice common ground and you work. So it brings it back to those things. If you can't collaborate, do you just compromise? So you kind of have to, there's always going to be a way to diffuse the conflict, whether you have to bring in outside help or find a different path to go on. I think that sometimes if you keep hitting a stone wall when you're trying to deal with the conflict, it might be best to go outside and get some extra help.
Thanks.
Ultimately, there's always other solutions. I mean, if there's one person in a company that might be a conflict, a point of conflict that originates conflict, then, as a manager, you either have to try to find a different approach to that person, have them there, maybe be in another position, try to work it in a way, and ultimately they might not even fit the company, culture, and you have to make a judgment call on that. So.
And also the timing is very important. That's why we stress why conflict management is important. The later you discover the conflict is undergoing, the less possible is going to resolve. So as a manager, you have to be aware, and then basically you have to prevent. And then when it happens in the early stage, you start to deal with it. Yeah.
I also think sometimes you have to step away from the conflict if it's too intense. Sometimes it's better just to take a step back.
Yeah.
The challenge is we're dealing with humans. People put emotional attachment to many things. So, like you did mention, it is important to step away, and using the model, the 6 hats is another tool to kind of take the emotion out of it, but be able to see it from many different aspects.
Yeah, you were talking about lateral thinking a couple of times. I kind of think I know what it is, but can you explain a little bit more?
Sure, it's because normally if you think about, for example, the hats, there's some, for example, there's one hat or one way of thinking that there is predominant in you. So, and it's the same in every meeting. So if you think of hats in a meeting that you will have at the same time, you will have a red, a white, a different kind. So it's very difficult to discuss because, and also you are blind by what only you think. So with this method, what it allows to everyone at the table think in the same way. So you tackle the same issue but first from this side, then to this side, and then to this side, all at the same time. So that is lateral thinking.
So you also said that assertive was the optimal way of kind of handling communication, or so do you think there's an in-between, like if we think back to the SDIs, and where we fell in terms of conflict and arrow, so somewhere like in between assertive and...
Certainly, as a manager, you'll get conflict in situations that are situational, so you would have to attack you would have to attack it many different ways. There's not one particular method to use. So there may be some instances where you may have to attack something from an aggressive standpoint in order to get it done. Yeah. But in terms of saying that assertive is the optimal, is because at that level you are taking into consideration, you want to resolve the conflict, or you want to force your opinions and ideas, but you're also looking at it from another point of view. In some instances, you may have to, like you're mentioning, use a bit of both aggression as well as assertiveness. But assertiveness is like it's the most normal way to approach a conflicting situation.
I also don't think it's assertive as much as like I'm gonna push in here, and I'm gonna be assertive and get my point across. I think it's just a way of getting to the point quicker and not kind of putting a lot of fluff around it, so that the issue is on the table and you can find a way to kind of work towards a problem and not kind of deviate from what the problem is. You know how sometimes when you're in conflict, it could be one thing and then it ends up being 10 things. So it's just a matter of sticking to that one issue that you have and finding a way to move on from there.
Yeah, and also, you can also approach it from different angles, not just, maybe you have someone who works with you who is more emotional, or is more data-driven. Yeah. So how do you perceive and how are you able to analyze the person and know what actually makes them click? Will actually make you better at giving an assertive message, because you will actually key into those things that they hold, that they appreciate. So it's not just that you give the right message. It doesn't necessarily just have to be assertive or aggressive or passive. It's also there are many other it's a palette. So you have to either you know have to mix and match a little bit because depending on who you're talking to, many different things might work or not.
It's just building on from what the two of them were saying, it just depends basically on exactly what Azura said. It's who you're dealing with as well. You know that maybe perhaps a really assertive way would work with X individual, but with another individual you need to be maybe a bit more aggressive because, as Maria was talking about the thinking hats, everyone has one predominant hat, right? So the person who's negative all the time might actually require a more aggressive approach to dealing with conflict. And I think that's where the whole understanding of conflict management comes in, because as a good manager, if you can understand what works with different individuals within your team, you'd be able to deal with it faster and more efficiently.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.